I'll just start with, what do I see with these soils to begin with. So just without even considering the rootstocks, what am I seeing with these soils? So firstly, what we can see is, no, firstly you tell me what you see. I'm gonna ask you a question. Where are the roots? Where are they and where aren't they?
Are in the soil and not in the limestone.
Where are they?
In the soil, not in the limestone.
Yeah, so they're in the soil, not the limestone. Whereabouts in the soil are they? Are they in the top?
10 to 30?
Yep, 10 to 30. So they're not in this top layer, which is often what you see. But when I chip away, I've got my hammer, so I can chip away. But you see there's there's crust in here. There's big lumps coming off here. And so, yeah, they're in the sort of 10 to 30 range. And you'll see that pretty much across all of the pits. They're in the 10 to 30 range. So here they're limited by this calcareous layer. And they're limited in the surface soil by, this crusted hard layer, which, we often see in vineyards through herbicide and, the sun. And so, yeah, there's a lack of roots in this top layer. But in this particular soil pit, and it's the only one out of the ones, and they do vary a little bit, despite the fact we tried to identify sort of moderate vigour soil profiles. They do vary a bit, but even still, the roots in every one are in that sort of 10 to 30 to 40 centimetre range, really nothing below that. And when I say where are the roots that are less than 2 mils in diameter are the ones that are pulling the water and nutrients out of the soil. So when we see big tap roots, they may lead to smaller roots, but in themselves are not pulling water and nutrients out of the ground. So where's the effective root volume here? And so the effective root volume is between 10 and 30 centimetres. So, but also in this pit, you guys can probably see some roots. Some roots are here. There's fewer there's some still here going out into the mid-row, and there's also a couple here going out into the mid-row as well. And so there's sort of a rubbly layer, this rubbly calcrete layer. So they're finding their way through and around this rubbly layer where there's soil and gaps and, into the mid-row. And not many of the other soil pits we see that, matter of fact none. And so I was a little bit surprised by that. I dug some soil pits here when I was young and fit, in my 20s, maybe I was younger fit. And I remember with AFCAS, we saw many roots going into the mid-row. And one of the things that AFCAS mentioned was, the resilience of terra rossa soils is one of the things that makes them really good soils. So by resilience, I mean, they sort of almost spring back from any compaction. But that's not what we saw yesterday. So really minimal roots into the mid-row. And lots of wheel traffic compaction, hard layers at sort of 30-40 centimetres, whether it's calcrete or it's sort of a light clay that's pretty hard. So really overall, really low root densities, really low root volumes. So the thing about, if we look at this chart, I'll just explain these charts a little bit. So this middle chart here, we've got the rootstock, we've got effective rooting depth in millimetres, so total available water. So total available water is calculated from the rooting depth. So in this example, I've just calculated in a depth, a linear measurement, not a volume measurement, just to simplify it. So total available water is the depth of the effective rooting zone and the water holding capacity of each texture of each soil horizon. So, say we've got a loam here, we've still got a loam here, other sites which moves into a light clay. So using tabulated charts of total available water per centimetre of soil, so that's millimetres per centimetre, so of each different texture. And then the charts I use have a function of soil structure as well. So a well-structured loam will hold more water than a poorly structured loam, for example. So they're the charts that I use to calculate that measurement. Obviously we couldn't take samples and put them on suction plates and do it that way. So I use tables when I'm looking at most soil profiles now. So then on this chart we've got root density score and root volume score. So when we finished digging their soil pit, Suzanne and I just went around and we scored based on just our visual assessment of what we saw in terms of root density and root volume. So that's quite a qualitative number. We didn't measure root length and we didn't measure root density. So it's just a quick visual assessment, trying to be as objective as we could be. And then average shoot length, so that's a quick measurement. We didn't measure every shoot, but an estimate of the average. And then yield is an actual number. So then in the graph below, as I was tabulating those numbers, we could see that as we would expect, total available water, an increase in total available water, an increase in root density and an increase in root volume means more vigorous vines, means greater shoot length, higher yields, but that's what you would expect. So if we look at that chart at the bottom, there's a correlation between, on the x-axis, the sum of the root density and volume by total available water, and then yield on the y-axis. So there is a reasonable correlation, except for one of the Merbean clones that had an extraordinarily higher yield. We may have underestimated root density and root volume, but you know, as I say, we didn't measure it, so it's a bit kind of hard to get that perfect. So there is a correlation, and so what we saw was within the limited root volume, so depth and mostly limited into the mid-row, those clones that had the higher shoot length and the high yields tended to have higher root densities from our objective score. So they were able to utilise the volume of soil better. So Nick can talk about maybe more why. Yeah, but that's basically what we saw. So for me, it's about trying to understand, you know, hopefully we could see a relationship between root density, root volume and vine vigour, because, you know, as we know, we can dramatically increase, and I'll talk about this afternoon, we can dramatically increase the amount of water available to vines and nutrients available to vines by improving root volume and root density. So, like, significantly. So